Okay guys, gonna do a different video for you today. If you watched my last video, you'll know that I did switch over to a different brand of sonar unit. I'm now using Humminbird. That being said, we're going to try to install this guy. So I'm gonna do a video on how to install the Humminbird unit. Of course, I have a Nitro Z6, so I guess it would really be a Nitro install, as most of those boats are similar. But you can carry over, I think, the fundamentals to most other boats. The last video I did, people found pretty informative for Lowrance, so I think, I mean, at the very least, it's a basis for somebody to go off of. As with all my videos, I am an amateur. Keep that in mind. Take everything I do with a grain of salt. Don't comment and say, hey, you suck. Why did you tell me to do this? Because I don't know what I'm doing either. But anyways, we got the last one done, so I'm sure we can get this one done. So stay tuned, let's see what we can do. Okay, so I am doing this on the fly without a lot of lighting, so please be patient with me, I guess. But I've already taken the liberty of doing a few things because I did have to remove the old unit and transducer to sell it. So a couple of things have already been done, but I'll go over what I've done with you before we get into anything important that involves that particular method, I guess. Okay, so the first thing we have here at our console on the Z6, our fuse box is behind this console, and that's where you'll hook up your positive and negative. So the problem we have here is that this unit is in the way. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and pull this unit out so that we can work with everything back there. And then once we get that done, I'll kind of show you the best I can where you're going to be plugging everything in there and where you'll be running your cables. So real fast, the way to, if you've never removed your console unit here, you're going to have to get under your console here and you're going to have to lay on the floor. But there's little butterfly nuts, or whatever you want to call them, on the back. Really just reach in there, feel around for them, and unscrew them. They're not very tight on there. Once you get them unscrewed, make sure you hang on to them real well and keep them somewhere safe, and then that unit will just pop right off. Okay, so now we've got our butterfly nuts off the back of our unit. We can just pull it right out here. It should come right off. Okay, so all we're going to do, this one doesn't have a transducer hooked up because I mainly use it for my mapping, since I do have cartography maps that go with it. I am going to keep this unit in the console for now. I don't know that I'm really going to switch it just because it would be a huge hassle, and it does everything I need it to. So I think I'm just going to leave it there for the time being. Other than that, we just need to go ahead and unhook our power cable here from the back, and that unit's done for now. So we're good to go with that. So in here, and I'll try and get the best shot I can. So if you can see that clear box in there, that is your fuse box, and to where your positive and negative terminals will go. So you're going to want to hook it up to a fuse, obviously, so that it doesn't blow or anything. If you have a free one, hook it up to that. If you don't, just hook it up to an old one. I don't have a reserve on this one just because I didn't really need to take the power cable off. So I'm going to go ahead and, I had an extra power cable that I sent off with the old one, so I'm going to have to remove that power cable, the old Lowrance one, and then hook up the new one. So I will go ahead and unhook that one. I don't know that I'll be able to give you a shot of it, but I mean, once I get that, once you pop off that plastic thing there, and as you can see over here, hopefully, there's a little yellow latch. You just push in on that latch and it'll pop that off. There's not a lot of room to work with, so it's not easy to do. If you have curved wrenches or screw sets, those are the best things you can use for this. I do happen to have some. I did not the first time, and it made it pretty tough to do. So I recommend, if you have some, to use those. So let me go ahead and pop this off, and I'll show you what we're working with here. Okay, so we have the top off there. And it's going to be hard for me to show you this, but let me see if I can get in here and get some lighting on it. Okay, so this is our old power cable. Or maybe it's this one. It's this one. Okay, this is our old power cable. So as you can see here, we have a 5-volt fuse there that we have screwed into our hot wire screwed into that. So you're going to unscrew that screw, and then over here on this side we have our ground. The grounds aren't marked, but that's what these guys are, the grounds on them. So we need to remove this and this, and if you don't have this problem already, you basically just need to hook up your hot wire, which is going to be your red, to one of your 5-volt fuses, and then ground it on this side over here. And that's all you need to do. So I'm going to go ahead and make and again, this is kind of hard work if you don't have the curved screwdrivers, because you're really working with limited space in here. But again, it's doable. So we're going to remove that. I will show you where I'm going to put the new ones, and we'll put those on there. Okay, so we've got our old Lowrance cables off. As you can see here, they have the little connector pins soldered on, and the way that those work are the little screws that you unscrewed, and when you're pulling these out, be very careful that they don't fall on that console there, because there are a lot of wires for them to get stuck in, and again, very dark, limited space you're working with. Basically, the way this works is you'll put that screw in there and screws it back in, and it gets your connects your voltage there. Now with the new Humminbird wires, and actually the Lowrance wires didn't come that way either, but they don't come with those connectors on there. You can go to Walmart, or really, I mean, any hardware store, and get connectors and a stripper with connectors on it that you can put on there. That way they'll adapt to that. They don't necessarily need to be the circle ones. They can be forked, and I have an actual kit that I'll show you in a moment with examples, but they can be the forked ones as well. They'll fit on there just fine. Okay, so this is the stripping kit I was talking about. Again, it's like $6. You can get more expensive ones, but it comes with any kind of hookup. Again, these are the round ones, and then these are the forked ones I was talking about before. And of course, these here, these we'll be using at the front of the boat, and you'll see that when we get there, but these will come into a factor. So it's best just to get the whole package with all the stuff in there. The only other thing I would recommend getting is some heat shrink to put around the cable so that they don't get water or anything into them. Electrical tape works, but I prefer heat sink just because it's a more stable solution than the electrical tape. So I'll actually kind of do a time lapse of myself putting these on there. They're pretty easy, but I mean, if you've never done any wiring work, it might be something to show. Okay, so on our little adapters here, I took the liberty of pulling the plastic parts off of it. Again, I like to use the heat sink. I don't really like theirs; they're too stiff. You can't really move them around. So, anyways, we'll go ahead and get into this part. In order to do the wiring here, and this isn't separated enough, so what I'm going to do is get a pair of scissors. Well, I guess I could use my brand new strippers if they're big enough. Okay, so now we should have plenty enough to reach both sides from the looks of it. The first thing we're going to do here is we're going to get our heat shrink if you have that. If not, you can use electric tape. That step will come later. So you'll get the heat shrink and cut up enough length to cover over the metal end of that and your long end of this. So I always like to cut a little bit more just so that we're on the safe side. Okay, and you're going to put that on before you do anything else, just so that it's on there. Okay, so you're going to go ahead and put your adapter on there, and then you'll just clamp it down to where it has a really tight and good connection on there. And again, I do it both ways. You can do this by, with just a regular pair of pliers, but it helps to have these. So just check it and make sure that it's on there and it's not going anywhere. When you're good with that, pull your heat shrink up and over the connection there so that you're not going to get shocked. And if you're not familiar with heat shrink, basically it's just plastic or polymer or whatever it is that when you apply heat to it, it shrinks down. So what we're doing here is basically just creating a seal. We'll put the heat on there and it'll start to shrink around our cable and our adapter. And give us a good tight seal on there. so that we don't have any exposed wires or anything like that. It looks more professional than the tape, but at this point, this is where you would go ahead and duct tape around it. So again, for the exact same reason, so that you don't have anything showing or sticking out there. We'll just go a little bit more here at the bottom to shrink. And you got to be careful. You want to just move the heat around it. You don't want to just hold it under there to where it starts to burn or anything. It just needs that heat to do it. Okay, so then we'll repeat the same step on the other side. Heat shrink first, then our adapter. Get it on there. And we'll get it, and we'll just go ahead and crimp it down. Again, you can just use regular pliers. Just as long as it's on there tight enough to where it's not going anywhere. When you do your heat shrink, if you're using black or white, sometimes you can use red, whatever colors you get. Just make sure you know which is your positive and which is your ground. Okay, so now our power adapter for our Humminbird is ready to go ahead and be screwed into that particular thing. And on other boats, I don't know. Again, this is strictly for Nitro Z6, but I assume other Nitros will work the same. So now we can put our screws in there and just screw them back in. Okay, so again, we're going to want to make sure we have these plugged into one of them that is marked 5 volts. And again, you can, when you're looking in there, you will be able to see, let me get this and show you. You can see there are the orange 5-volt markers. I have an empty one there, and then on this side will be your grounds. That's where you're going to ground everything on these 6 right here. Of course, there's 5 there now because I have one removed. But again, any of these 5 over here, I believe there's usually 2 that are just empty. So I think you'll usually have 2 or 3 to work with, and then of course your grounds over here. So we're going to go ahead and screw those in there, and I'll show you what we've got when we're done. Okay, so we finally got our power cable connected back in there. This is one of the tougher parts of the project. I'll tell you right now, you're going to need some patience. You're going to drop the screw a bunch of times. Again, there's not a lot of room to work with, but I'll show you where we got it here. So here's our new cable. We have our positive here hooked up to the 5-volt, and then coming over here, as you can see from this one, we have our ground hooked up right here. You're going to want those screwed in there tight. It is going to be tough to get them in there tight because there's not much space, but as you know, for running on the water, it can get pretty bumpy, and those things can work themselves out. So keep that in mind. So you're going to want to get them as tight as possible. Once you're done with that, you're done with the power wiring. You can go ahead and put your fuse cover back on, and you're good to go with that. Just make sure you run your cable back down through here and under the console down here. Depending on where you're going to hook it up, of course I have my RAM mount hooked up out here, and I'll be running the cables up through the console there. Okay, before you put your old unit back on there, or if it's a new unit or however you're doing it, make sure you test your power source before you get all that back on there and done, and then you find out, oh, I hooked something up wrong. It's a real pain to do that. I'm going to check mine here in a moment. And real fast before we get off the whole power section, this is what I was talking about as the bent screwdriver. I'm not sure where I got this, and I'm not sure where you can find them, but I'll tell you what, it makes it a million times easier to get in there and unscrew that and screw it back in, because this little bent portion here saves you tons of space getting that done. Okay, so we have our power cable set up there. We're good to go on that. That's generally the hardest portion of it. Now we're going to work on our transducer. So before I do anything else, I'm going to show you a little trick here to running your transducer cable. Okay, so like on our last video I mentioned, on the transducer, it's going to have to run to your unit here or at the console, wherever you may have it. On Lowrance, or on the Nitro, I don't know how we're going to be able to see this here, but this is one of the steps I already took. There's a little plastic portion here that runs all the cables from the back of the boat. It is screwed in, so you're going to have to unscrew that. It is cut so that you can open it up and get any cables in or out of there. So we're going to have to run our transducer cable. First off, we're going to have to run it from the back of the boat to the front. Obviously, you're not going to be able to fit that big transducer through that hole and then run it down the side of your boat. So where the cable runs is it starts here, it goes through your boat, down back through here, and then out the back of this hole back here where all your motor cables run. It is hollow through here, so it's pretty easy to get done. The solution to doing this that I have come up with, and sorry for the camera work here, but very limited space, is getting some old wire coat hangers, undoing them and connecting them one by one to where it's long enough to where you can connect that the end of that transducer and pull it through your boat. It works pretty well. That's how I did it last time. So we'll go ahead and start connecting these. And the biggest thing is you want them as straight as possible. And when you connect them, you don't want any loose ends hanging off to connect to, or to catch on anything in there at the bottom. And I'll show you what I mean by loose ends once I get one connected here. Okay, so basically I'll wrap them around each other and then bend the ends down to the side. So this is the important part to me, is now, like I said, you don't want these loose ends hanging out to either scratch the inside of your boat or to get hung on the cables in there. So what I do is I take electric tape, but just about any tape will work that's, you know, pliable and soft. I wouldn't recommend wrapping tape or anything like that, but I mean, you know, duct tape or anything like that. And I'll take that and just run it around those ends to make sure that now they're soft and they'll go through, and not to mention they won't scratch your boat up in there or anything. So I'll do that one more time, and that should be plenty long enough to give me something to work with to get that cable through there. Okay, so now we have our wire hangers all ran together here. I have 3 put together, which is more than long enough to run through the boat here. Next up, what I'm going to do is show you exactly the process behind this. Okay, so again, our cables will be running from down here under your console to this hole. And again, this black thing was screwed in with 2 black screws on there. There's just 2 screws on each side of it. The left and the right hand side, you'll unscrew those. You'll kind of pop that out, and there are, don't know if you can see that there, but there's a slit in the side of it that allows you to run cables through it. So we're going to take that cable, run it through the side of the boat here, all the way down through the back, and then out this here. Okay, again, I mentioned I'd taken some liberties earlier. Generally, this is the same type of plastic thing here that is at the front of the boat, but this is usually on the outside connecting those together. This is normally not cut in half like this. In order to get my cable out, I did have to cut this in half because there just wasn't enough room for me to get it out of there. So this will make the process a lot easier for me to get it in and out. However, you don't have to cut this up, but it is going to be a hell of an event for you to get it in there. As far as cutting it, it wasn't that big of a deal to me because generally there's a secure tie through here, and as you can see, there's the screw holes here that screw all this together in there. So this will be screwed back on, plus the secure tie will make sure that that's back together. Just make sure you don't cut through your screw hole here. I got a little bit too close on accident, but still, it should be fine. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to start. Okay, so first and foremost, on the Z6, you have your storage here, and this pulls out. We're going to pull this out, and then under there, the cables will run through, and I'll show you that in just a minute. Okay, so we've now removed our storage, and you can see here now where these cables run from the back of the boat to the front. You can see it's pretty much hollow down through here. So what we're going to do is take our coat hangers that we just made, and we're going to run them from under the console back through the side of that hollow portion of the boat back down to here. Once we had those run down here, we're going to put the plug-in end of our transducer through here and run it back down through here. Once we get that done, since we have those hangers there, we're going to tape that end of that transducer flat to that, and then just pull that the close hangers back out and through, and then that will have our transducer hookup back to the front of the boat. Okay, so here we have our transducer cable. Their ends are a lot easier, or a lot smaller than the Lowrance. So the step of removing this and unscrewing this might not be necessary in order to get it in and out. As a matter of fact, I really don't think you'll need to with the small size. But all we're gonna do is get that through there, run enough cable to make sure that we can grab it from the inside and connect it to our hanger in there. We're gonna wanna leave quite a bit of line out here so that we have enough space. I mean, depending on where we want to put our transducer, you know, we're going to need enough line to either run it to the side or the side, you know, et cetera, depending. The problem I have right now, and for those of you who are wondering where I mounted my Lowrance, this is where I put it. It hung down just enough to where it came about 1/8 of an inch under there and it would read. However, I'm not sure how that's going to work with our new unit. I don't know about installing it right here, how well that would work. So we'll go from there and just kind of see. But for now, we're worried about getting our cable through here. So I have that ran through. Give me a second, we'll get in there and I'll show you what to do. Okay, so you can see we now have our transducer plug in here along with our hanger. So what we're going to do is take this along with the same tape that we used earlier, and we're going to tape that together flat on there to where the tape goes over the end of this and the end of this, so it's one smooth portion to where when you start pulling it through, there's nothing for it to get hung up on. Okay, we've got it taped on there and we're ready to start pulling. We'll just go back to the front there under the console, start pulling the hanger back through, and once we get it through, we're good to go. Okay, we now have our transducer cable pulled through. We'll take that tape off there, and yeah, for the most part, we got that on. The last portion we're gonna do is get the cables up through the boat, and then we'll have to find a place for the transducer. Okay, so as far as pulling the cables through here, we have both of our cables down here hooked up and ready to go. You can just run them through here and then run them up through the back if you don't want to put a hole in your console. It's not a problem. They'll work just fine that way. Just make sure you take and you do a zip tie up to the other cables here so they're not hanging down or do anything like that. So in my case, I do have a hole here. Basically, I just use a 3/8 drill bit and an electric drill and ran that hole through the console there. You have to be very careful doing it so that you don't put any cracks or anything in your gel coat. If you do, just kind of get them and sand them out and even them out. In my case, I did find a 3/8 inch grommet that'll go through there and has plastic around the sides, and that'll protect them once the cables are through. Cut a hole in the side of it there so that the cables will fit through, and you can take it and put it in there. You can glue it on. I don't have mine glued on because it stays in there anyways. Plus, I don't really want to put any glue around that particular place just in case you know, I ever need to do anything else to it. Okay, so next up, we're going to run into mounting the actual transducer. This is the part that can be kind of rough. You're going to have to put some holes in your boat. There's no two ways about it unless you want to run a hole through. Don't know that you get as good readings that way. The biggest thing about mounting your transducer is getting it to read while you're running your boat. When you run your boat, I'm sure you know, when you get up, your boat goes up, goes on plane, and then runs. And then it runs on the palm here, in my example, on the palm of my hands, or on the pad of the boat. So that boat is dipping down into the water and then running that way. So your transducer needs to be in a place to where you want it to run just fairly with the water. You don't want a lot of water splashing up on it or bubbles, or you're going to get, you know, either you're going to get terrible readings, no readings, or inaccurate readings, or whatever. Right now, the placement I have on the Lowrance was perfect. It fit very well. I can't remove that one. Those screws are in there well. That marine sealant I put on there is staying. So, another problem I had is that the new Humminbird transducer mount does not fit there, even if I could get it off. So I'm not sure. I think I'm going to have to move it up and mount it here. The to get it to run. I'm really hoping it'll read that way because I don't want to put holes in my boat that don't need to be there, especially with these screws. They're pretty long. I'm pretty sure they're going to go all the way through the hull. Another thing you're going to need is some very good marine sealant. Walmart carries Atwood or Atwood marine sealant, and it works very well. That stuff's not coming off. That's what I put on there. So yeah, if you're gonna get it on there, first get a pair of gloves, and we'll go over that later. But get a pair of gloves, and wherever you get it, it's gonna stay. So give me a minute here. We're gonna get everything all set up, get ready, and we'll start installing this guy. On the Humminbird mounts, they're a lot different than the Lowrance. I've actually had a Humminbird on an old boat, but it was super old, a grayscale. I didn't know much about it. But what's neat about these brackets, and I've actually had this problem with the Lowrance before, is this goes into the back here, and as you can see, it swivels, and then it clicks in here, and it has a good stable connection. However, if you run into something, it's breakaway, so it breaks up so that you don't tear off your transducer, you know, and ruin your whole unit, which again on the old Lowrance, and I'll actually have an example over here on my kayak. As you can see here, this one did hit something, and as you can see, there are two pieces. This whole thing came off here, and you can see broke there. I have fixed it. It's good enough for a kayak, but damage can be done if you're not careful. I did that as I was trailering, and the wind blew me sideways, and this hit on my boat buckle and just knocked that thing off. Of course, I didn't lose it because of the cable and everything, but still, you cannot buy these things separate, and if you do, I think they're like 50 bucks. So I mean, at that point, you can just buy a whole new transducer. So that's that. So the way these get mounted on here is you'll have one screw at the bottom. You have a heavy actual nut screw, and then here a smaller screw that goes into the middle. Now you do have the option of running that all the way through so it doesn't break away, but I think I'd rather have the breakaway on there, just like I said, because you know things can happen. So we're gonna do that. Next we're gonna, I don't know how I'm gonna do the lighting on it, but I'm gonna show you how to screw these into your boat. This is a real fun process. A lot of people don't like to put holes in their boat, especially in the back. However, it's got to be done, so we're going to do it. It's a little bit of a process, and I'll show you how to do that. We're going to get the trough right here. So what we need to do is kind of go ahead and get ourselves lined up here first on exactly where we want this guy. I think we want it a little bit parallel. So once you kind of get in alignment, what you need is a Sharpie or something that can get through those holes to mark exactly where you need to have your unit. Okay, so I think I'm good here. Just really can't make up my mind where I want to do this, but I really do think this is the best option we have here. So we'll take that marker, put it in there, make our marks where we need our holes drilled. Okay. All right, so now we have our holes marked where we need to be drilled. So once we have the holes marked that we're going to do, we can't just take the screws and go ahead and start screwing in there. You kind of have to work it one screw at a time, very slowly. If you just take some screws and start screwing in there, you're going to crack your fiberglass, and it's not going to look very good. And cracks lead to bad news. So the best thing to do here is to get your drill bit and kind of match it to the size of what you're going to do. Maybe even go a little bit smaller at first and then work it up. So here we have a 5/32. We're probably going to be looking at a 5/16 or a 3/16 or so, but we'll start out with this one small. And what we want to do, so that we're not just drilling a hole completely through the boat there, we only want to go as deep as we need to go. So what we'll do is we'll take that drill bit and that screw and stick it on the end of it, and then we'll mark with tape just about where we need to be there. And I'm just using masking painter's tape, so that now we know Once we hit that tape, that's as far as we need to go. We don't need to drill any further than that. And if we are, we're just making a bigger hole than we need to. So we'll put that in our drill and start with that. We'll do both holes. An important thing to do here is go very, very slow, because again, the faster you go, the more chance you're going to ruin it. The slower you go, it's just kind of easing itself into there and just making it a lot easier on your boat and yourself for that matter. So we will remove this and get started. Okay, so again, we're really going to take our time here drilling these holes, and after each one, we're going to check and make sure that our alignment is correct the way we want it. Okay, we got in there down to the tape, so that's as deep as we need to go. We'll leave it like that. We will check the screw to see if it'll go in there. If we need more, we can move up to a bigger size. If it's good that way, then we're good to go. Okay, so we have our first hole drilled here. The screw looks good in it. So the next thing we're going to do is just go ahead, get our mount back up here, make sure it looks good, make sure our holes are still lined up, in which in this case it's off just a little bit here. So that's why we want to go back and check. So the best thing to do at this point is to get it perfectly lined up here, and then get our drill bit in here and start drilling so that we know for sure our holes are going to match up. Okay, so once we have that started, we can go ahead and come back in and finish up on our hole. Okay, so now we have our second hole drilled there. We'll go ahead one more time, check our alignment now. Okay, we're good to go. I'll just make sure that our screw is going to go in there. Looks good. Okay, so now we're still not ready to put the screws in there. If we just stuck the screws in there, we would not have a watertight hole. So what we want to do is take our marine sealant that we got and go ahead and shove some of it down in there, so that when we put our screws in, now that sealant is going to seal off those holes so there's no water getting in or out of there. So we'll put our sealant in there first, then we'll slowly put in our screws, and we're good to go. Okay, so with any marine sealant, I'd really recommend wearing gloves. The last time I did this, I did not, and I worked at a bank at the time, and it was very fun having to explain that to everybody that came through, why my hands were permanently white. So we're gonna get some gloves on. I know you can't see me, but trust me, I have gloves on. And my marine sealant is so good that it has sealed off the nozzle that allows you to place the attachment in there. So I'm having to cut some off the side. And another reason why I'm wearing gloves, because I'm gonna have to physically force that stuff in there with my fingers. Generally you'll have a nozzle or something. But we're just gonna push that stuff in there the best we can. And this particular stuff is very thick. Okay, so again with these screws, we're gonna go real slow, just like we did on the, okay, there we go. The bottom one in, we'll go ahead and slowly put that other top one in. Okay, before we screw the other one in, we want to get our mount on. There we go. Okay, we got it in there. So we now have our transducer mounted. Pretty much trouble-free. The only thing left to do is to bolt it on through here, and that's pretty self-explanatory as far as that goes. Okay, so there we go, guys. There is our finished product. The only thing I'm kind of worried about is maybe this guy getting in the way. Other than that, I think we're pretty good. And if this does get in the way, I can always cut that off. Not a big deal. But yeah, pretty good with how smooth it went. Everything else from here is just cleanup. I'm gonna need to come back in and of course screw this back in, pull our cable up, get everything Loctite back down, of course put our screws back in up front, and put our unit back in. Other than that, that's the installation video, guys. Again, everything I did, please take with a grain of salt. I am not an expert. I don't claim to be. Just doing it the best way I know how. I'm sure there are other ways to do it. I'm sure there are better ways to do it, but that's the way I did it. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to PM me, leave comments or anything like that. Thanks a lot for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. Don't forget to check out my giveaway. It goes through the end of this month, November 2015. Giving away a Spro BBZ1 Rat and the new Berkeley, I forgot their names, but the square bill crankbait and the lipless crankbait or rattle trap, whatever you want to call them. Anyways, thanks again for watching, guys.